Mercury. Narrated by Scott from Exuberant Knack. It is recommended that you read the story while you listen to it with headphones. Thank you and enjoy. Once upon a time, things were what they are, and if nothing had happened I'd have no story to tell. Before my father passed, he and I used to go on hunting trip every 2 weeks. There were still large pieces of land back then, the world wasn't quite so overpopulated and animals lived where they should in the wild. And in the wild is where my pa and I would find ourselves every other weekend with hunting rifles, dressed in khakis and eating tuna sandwiches, stalking the wood that made up the northern outskirts of New Kitchener County in Alabama. What mainly populated that wood was ducks, bucks, and mean old grizzlies. Of course, my pa and we hunted the ducks and bucks and left the grizzlies to their own tracking. And for me this was fine. I mean, most girls my age would scream and cry when I told them I hunted and killed Bambi every other Saturday, but it never bothered me, except one time I got to thinking all philosophically about this and that such and how God giveth life and all that hoo-ha. We weren't of the religious sort, my family and I, but one day I was telling a schoolmate we called Father Pie about my hunting, and he told me about God and how he was the only one who was allowed to give or take life, especially since we killed those ducks but never ate them, or the deer for that matter, cause some government bumpkin came out and told us all that the animals in the wood were not so good for eating on account of them drinking the contaminated water from the stream or some such nonsense. So on our next hunting outing I told my pa what Father Pie had said to me about killing just for fun and how it was wrong and all. And my da, well, he got all real serious like and grabbed my shoulder just so and leaned down to look me in the eye, and he said, "Honey bunches, sometimes as folks we need to do something a little wrong to keep us from doing something a lot wrong, and if God does exist, I'm sure he appreciates the effort." Jeremiah Ryan's last round. Jeremiah was a good lad who always looked in sensible light, who never followed his friend's fad but always did what was right. Jeremiah Ryan stands, quite rad, raven hair shining as he bows in the spotlight. Jeremiah Ryan had been the paper boy in his neighborhood for over 3 years, and in November 1974, business was as booming as ever. Jerry did the paper run every morning, riding his bike in fine weather and borrowing his dad's old beat-up Chevy when the weather was poor. He'd been doing this for 3 years, and after so many years of service he knew one thing for sure: he'd miss having an excuse to wake up at the crack of dawn every day to ride his bike around his lovely neighborhood. He really would. The people in New Kitchener had much and more appreciation for a good paper boy, and they had practically given him the money for his college tuition as well as a flood of recommendations that had put him on the dean's list and, coupled with being valedictorian, had allotted him a partial scholarship to Yale. And today was his last run. It was sort of fitting that the weather be sunny despite threatening rain for the past few days, and the little traffic that passed him had been folks smiling and waving real nicely, them knowing he was leaving the next day and all. Everything that day was on the bright and shiny until he passed Beth's house. He and Beth had been together since they were both 12, childhood sweethearts if ever one could believe that love could be found, so you, and grew up to be close friends and practically engaged for the past year. Only, Beth had had to abandon her acceptance into Yale on account of her father was a giant dick, mind you, and wouldn't let her go far away and wouldn't let his daughter get loans. He passed the house and threw the newspaper and for a second caught a glimpse of her unmistakable honey blonde hair through the window. There was pang in his heart. They had had a terrible fight the night before, worse than they'd ever been through, and that was saying a lot since they had a knack for bickering. Beth had laid it all clear that she was sure that he would find some Yale girl who would replace Beth in his heart, so, let us be honest to ourselves. You're gonna want this girl instead of your ghostly Beth, which all you have of her is a photograph by your bed, and then there'll be tears and shock and heartbreak 6 months from now instead of leaving it up as friends right here on good terms. What do you say?" He had disagreed and they'd fought, screaming, yelling, throwing things and crying most of the night, and had ended up leaving each other on really bad terms with nothing resolved between them.